Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. Hopefully everyone can hear me just fine. And yeah, it's been an interesting day, an interesting week. So I went and poured myself a drink. I've got that going. And I had something else here. I've got these just to really make my day a little bit better here. So, yeah, let me know in the chat if anyone's having audio trouble and if there's difficulty here. Um, and if I die, somebody call the ambulance because these are nuclear beans. All right, those worked out pretty well. Yeah, I've got beans that I have pickled in with Carolina Reapers, so they are quite. They're just the thing. All right, so what we've just heard is a bit of a surprise because right now I'm shocked. Baldwin is actually getting charged with involuntary manslaughter. And so I spent some time looking, and Sarah, I see your comment. I will get to it. I'm just starring it here. So I'm kind of stunned that this guy is actually being charged because I didn't think New Mexico had it in them, to be honest. I thought that they were going to back down and back out and just go, well, we don't think we're going to get the conviction, so we're not going to charge. And I want to be clear here. I don't know that he will actually get convicted. I think that there's a substantial chance he still beats these charges. I don't think in a perfectly fair world where everybody who did bad things was convicted and everybody who did not bad things was acquitted, I would think he would be convicted. But we don't live in that world. We live in a very different world where, sometimes you have problems with proof. So, and I think that this is one where in a perfect world, he would be convicted. I think that he may well be acquitted. And I mean, he's going to have a good defense team. I imagine he's got the money to pay for some actually decent, decent lawyers. Hopefully he's not having his film lawyer doing this anymore. But yeah, I see. Are we going to see Runkle Sidewalk Sleeping Part 2, New Mexico Boogaloo? That would be. I'm tempted. I'm so tempted. So, yeah. All right. So he's not the only one who's charged. The assistant director was also charged, and he has indicated that they've got a plea deal. So that one is just that one's kind of in the bag. That one's going to be sorted out. The next one is the armorer has been charged, and I think the armorer's got a much better chance of getting convicted than Baldwin does. And to be fair, the armorer should be in jail. The armorer should be going to jail from what we've heard. And I've got a really good question here that I'm going to bring up because this is something I wanted to talk about anyway. Am I surprised that they haven't announced charges for the company that supplies the live rounds? The thing is that the company was not supposed to survive or supply live rounds at all. They were supposed to be a company supplying film dummies. And the fact that they supplied some live rounds, from what we've heard, from what's been alleged in all sorts of documents, both police and civil suits, and to be fair, civil suits, you can allege just about anything in the thing. But there seemed to be indication that there was commingling of rounds there. And I mean, that guy should also be charged, and I'm not sure with what, but I'm sure there is some negligence aspect because, yeah. But the armor, her facing charges is kind of obvious, because in that case, it's so ridiculous. She failed in so many ways. And the first failure is that there were live rounds on set. And, the way it seems that they got on set was that the guy who was originally producing and just I'll sort of back up a little bit and talk about the differences in terms of what might appear on set. So, the first thing is a film dummy, just to get our terminology down. Because a film dummy is something that looks like a live round superficially, but there will be some signs that it's not a live round. Sometimes, not always, sometimes they'll have like a hole or a slot cut in the side of the casing, cut in the side of the brass. And, they will have no powder in them, but they'll put a metal BB in them, like a little metal sphere. And they push that in and seal it up, basically. And usually there is a like either no primer or an obviously fake primer, something along those lines, so that it can be readily determined. So the idea is that a film dummy is something that if you, when you look at a revolver, right? A revolver is different than a semi-auto in terms of its design. And the revolver, because of the cylinder, has these sort of basically windows that let you see the cartridges. And so the reason why you'd use a film dummy in a revolver is so that you can actually, so that you don't see that it's a blank. Because if it looks like a blank, then that's going to be a problem. So that's, kind of a film dummy. Now, how do you tell the difference between a film dummy and a live cartridge? Well, the first thing is that if you shake it, it should rattle. And live cartridges do not rattle because they don't have a metal thing in them. If you listen really carefully to a live cartridge, some live cartridges will make like a powder noise, because that's the gunpowder inside. But not all. And, you may not be able to hear it, but they should never rattle. And so ultimately, if you pick up something that is supposed to be a film dummy, and no, it is not. Let me just fix that. There we go. All right. Thank you very much. So if you pick up something that is a film dummy and it doesn't rattle, you should be throwing it out. You should be having a moment of panic, right? This should be a what the heck. And then you stop everything to figure this out, because this is a little like finding out that this is a little bit like finding out that there's no brakes on your car. And if you find out that there's no brakes on one vehicle that's being used at a movie set, you stop everything and you check the brakes on every single vehicle, right? This is not like, oh yeah, it's just no problem, we're good. This is a stop everything and check. So that's a film dummy, and they're intended to be easy to check because you have to be able to do this. But the other thing is that a film dummy shouldn't have a primer usually. And so the reason, another way you can check is just looking at the back of them. I have a video out there, and this video, I brought a complete newbie. Like, I literally said, I need somebody who's going to be in my area who has never shot a gun before. And I got a volunteer. And we went out to the gun range, and having never shot a gun before, I was able to take live 45 caliber cartridges, the same caliber that was used in this, along with some film dummy 45 caliber cartridges, mix them together, and basically just I'd grab one at random, hand it off to her. She would check blindfolded, and then would say, this one gets loaded because I think it's a dummy, or this one does not get loaded because I think it's a live cartridge. And with that, I loaded based on, her vetting or not vetting the cartridges. I loaded a 45 long Colt revolver, the same kind of revolver that Baldwin used, with 6 rounds. And then I fired 6 clicks downrange because she got it perfectly. This is somebody who is a complete newbie. it's somebody who's never shot a gun before. So that was something we were able to do in just like a few minutes. Like literally, we just drove up to the range. I sort of had a brief, hey, here's some basic safety rules at the range. Like you don't wander down range. You don't point a gun at anybody, this kind of thing. And after that, she was able to do it. So Baldwin says he's been on these movies for tons and tons of years, and he ought to know better. But you can, as I said, this is something that you can establish in like a 2-minute briefing. And quite frankly, this notion that like actors are too dumb to go through this, no, that's not true. And anybody who is too dumb to go through this shouldn't handle a firearm, movie set or otherwise. So that's dummies. The next thing that you might have on a film set are blanks. And blanks are used for a variety of reasons because they actually do have powder in them. What they don't have is a projectile. So a blank will typically have a crimped end, or it may have an end that is that has some sort of thing that's designed to disintegrate and not become a solid projectile. So something like packed clay and so forth. Because and I see just turned up, we're talking about Baldwin. We are. So that's, a blank is intended because it will actually make a bang, but more importantly, for a lot of films, it will actually make a flash of light. And the reason why that's important is that there's certain kinds of shots where you absolutely need that flash of light. If you are, as an example, if you watch some of the recent, and thank you, Linda DB, for the gift memberships there. If you watch, for instance, I think John Wick has some of these scenes. I think Equilibrium has some of these scenes. It's a common sort of scene, but basically they will, it's like a dark hallway where there's a gunfight and you can see the gunfire lighting things up. That you can only get with blanks. And I see Andrew's asking, was there anything notable this week in Canadian law? Yes, I will be getting to some of the Canadian law stuff. We're starting off with Baldwin because it's in the news. Now, people are asking, is there recoil with blanks? There is some recoil with blanks. The thing about blanks is that if you're talking about a semi-automatic firearm, those firearms will typically have to be modified for blank fire. And the reason why is that the blanks have less oomph to them. And the reason why that's a problem, and for YouTube, this is an airsoft gun. This is not a real firearm. It is just for demonstration purposes, but it looks similar. So airsoft gun, and I can just hold it up here. So hopefully you can read Tokyo Mari, not who's a manufacturer of airsoft. When this is fired, the energy pushes the slide back and then it, drops back forward. And so if there's not enough pressure to make that action happen, then it won't cycle properly. And that's not good for your gunfight scene, right? So what they'll do to modify that is they'll actually constrict down the barrel. So the barrel will be narrowed at the end with some sort of plug or something like that. Dusty is saying, I don't see an orange tip, not required in Canada. So that's a modification that they would make for a semi-auto firearm with an air, with blanks. The key issue is that you don't do that with revolvers. Revolvers, you don't narrow like that because revolvers don't cycle because of the revolvers don't cycle because of the energy of the shot. They cycle based on the energy of your hand doing the thing. So, yeah. See, can't believe you didn't crack out the screwdriver gun for this. It's in the garage. I would have gone to get. Now, a couple of things about blanks. They come in like quarter power, half power, full power. So depending on what you're doing. The other thing is that blanks are not necessarily safe because if you get There was an instance of an actor who, having heard that the gun was loaded with blanks, put it up to his head and fired and killed himself because there's still a blast of energy out the front, and many of them will have something that disintegrates fairly quickly, but you can still get killed by a blank at short ranges. The other thing that's happened is if you have a blank, but somehow a projectile gets into the gun somehow. And the famous example of this is the set of the Crow film, where a projectile had come loose from another thing, had blocked the barrel, and then when a blank was fired out of it, it basically creates a full gun. Right at that point, you've got a full bullet, sort of setup there. So that's a blank, right? And blanks aren't really an issue here, but there was a thought of Baldwin at one point said that he thought maybe it could have been a blank, but it wasn't. It was a live cartridge. The third thing, and this is something that should almost never be on a film set, is a live cartridge. A live cartridge is just ammunition, right? It's just standard ammunition where it's a bullet, it's powder, it's primer, all of that. And on most film sets, there should never, ever be a live cartridge. And I will say there are exceptions for filming where you might have a live cartridge. Those exceptions are like if you're doing a scientific analysis. Like if you watch Mythbusters, Mythbusters has a few scenes in it where, for instance, they have fired a bullet and looked at it through like high-speed film, or just to see like let's test a myth about like, is this useful body armor or something like that. In that case, you might have a live cartridge, and I will tell you, the armorers I spoke to have said that basically they consider that to be kind of bad juju to have to do something where there's a live cartridge. But in those cases, they go to extreme measures. Things like, let's pull out a single live cartridge from the lock thing. It is transported, as it is, as one live cartridge and loaded in. Everything has to be super accounted for because, yeah. This film should not have had a live cartridge on set at all. And a live cartridge on set at this point is a little bit like finding... I'm just trying to think of a suitable example here. It's like if you were at... how they test airport security with fake bombs. It's like if you found an actual bomb mixed in with that, right? You would stop everything and go, what the heck? If you were running a kitchen and you discovered that one, the salt was actually rat poison, not only would you be like, oh, well, I guess we have to throw out this, the salt. You'd throw out every dish you had made thus far, and you would go and inventory every spice that you had to make sure it wasn't also rat poison. And you would also like figure out what the heck had happened. There is no, there is absolutely no reason for this. And it should have been an, oh my God, stop everything. So, and Claude, I see your thing there. And so how a real bullet got onto a film set still baffles me. Well, there's two potential sources that are bizarre. So one of those potential sources is that there are reports that there was people doing training, like doing practice with with these guns on set, or and that's nuts to me. Like, that is just crazy. And the other explanation that seems to be the case is that the guy who was providing them, like who actually, they subcontracted out to a guy to provide them with the film dummies. The guy who did that seems to have commingled ammunition that was live ammunition and dummy ammunition. Now, everything on this set was wrong. This is one of those things where you just like you look at it and you go like, what went wrong? And then by the time you're done digging into it, you're like, what didn't go wrong? They found live ammo basically all over the place. They found live ammo mixed with dummies on Baldwin's gun belt. They found live ammo on the gun table. They found live ammo everywhere. And that is ridiculous. This was just absolutely nuts. So, in terms of what did various people do wrong, as I mentioned, and I just rubbed my eye when I'm got a hand covered with nuclear bean juice. That's going to be fun. So, in terms of the AD there, he's indicated he's pleading guilty, and yeah, that makes sense because he's the guy who picks up this gun and calls out "cold gun" and hands it to Baldwin. Well, cold gun and handing, it's clear he didn't check this thing, and it's also clear I don't think the guy had the knowledge to check the thing, right? I don't think he had the actual skills required for that. So why Baldwin is taking a gun declared as cold gun by this guy who is not the armorer, and when the armorer is nowhere to be seen, is bizarre to me. So that guy is, it looks like he's going to get a short period of jail, and that is appropriate. Hopefully it also ends his career. The next person who is getting charged is, and I see somebody asking, red wine and cola. No, this is a really lazy Caesar. I didn't do the proper rimming and all of that and so forth. But the next person who's been charged is the armorer herself. And the armorer, quite frankly, her situation is ridiculous. Oh, I'm seeing 6 month probation. I thought he was getting six months jail. I got to reread that. So yeah. All right. So it is absolutely ridiculous that what was going on there, because there are indications she was aware of live cartridges having been found and didn't stop everything. It is absolutely wild. So yes, the armorer may have a defense to part of it, which is, hey, they were keeping me from doing my job. But the armorer ultimately should have walked. And what I mean by walked is the armorer should have said, listen, you guys aren't letting me do armorer things properly. You're requiring me to do a bunch of other stuff. You're requiring me to, do, various other things. That's the point where you say, listen, I am in charge of the guns. The armorer's ultimate duty is that they are they are the person in charge. And so fundamentally, the armorer has the power to shut down filming because they can say, listen, we're not doing this. People walked off the set because of safety issues and pay issues and so forth. It's absolutely nuts what was going on there. So the one that surprised me and that is really interesting is Alec Baldwin and, him getting charged, because I didn't think that there was enough courage in all of New Mexico's prosecution to actually, look at this and to actually lay the charge. But they did. And so let's talk about that one. And before we do, I'll get to some super chats just before I get too far behind. Did I see that YouTube has changed the interpretation of some rules around gun channels and is striking old videos? I did. It probably won't affect me, but I can only say probably. Jenny Wallace, thank you for the membership. Same with Crafting Mama and Lisa Kennedy and Jennifer Edwards. Did you do an analysis of the gun slash shooting such a particular gun? I've done a couple. I will tell you that right now in my gun safe, I have 2 of the same gun that Baldwin used. 2. I also have a bag of film dummies because, yeah, I see simple there. The armor is there, so this won't happen. I'm going to talk about that and how that plays into Alec Baldwin's culpability. Question, are you surprised that they haven't announced charges for the company that supplies the live rounds? I am, but there may well be an example of why they may not have been able to get him, just in terms of, evidentiary issues and so forth. Kinney said in interviews that the type of live rounds was not a type he uses or supplies. That's interesting, certainly. Isn't there 20 minutes of interview tape with him explaining the difference between dummies, blanks, and live rounds? There is. And we're going to get to that. I got a comment on that one. Question, isn't Alec Baldwin the proximate cause of the death? Why are 3 being charged? If it had only been intentional and he were charged with murder, would the others be charged with involuntary, or only Alec Baldwin charged? If they actually had something to say that Alec Baldwin had committed an intentional murder, and they don't have anything like that, there just is no indication of that, then Alec Baldwin would be the only one charged. Like if there was some video of Alec Baldwin doing something like, unloading the film dummies and loading in live cartridges, then Alec Baldwin would be the only one facing charges. But that is not the case. This is not a murder, right? And they're not charging murder. So, yeah. The reason why they can charge multiple people is that you can have multiple people at fault for something. Let's say we've got 3 mechanics working on a car, and all 3 fail to fix the brakes, right? Then at that point, all 3 can potentially be liable. So there's a situation where you can have multiple people at fault. April Crawford, I think Baldwin was set up. I mean, it shouldn't have been possible to set him up in this fashion. Vez from Quebec, thank you for being here, and always great to see you. So happy to get your take on this. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Les Charette, what a mess. I agree. Just Sarah, thank you for the membership. And Baby Gator, thank you for ranting about the situation. So much effery. It's astounding. It is. So, Alec Baldwin is, he is first and foremost. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about Alec Baldwin is an actor and so forth. First and foremost, he's a human being. And any human being has certain obligations if you start doing stuff with very dangerous things, like, say, handling a gun. And I see JC saying, no fan of Baldwin, but he isn't the only one responsible. I agree. He isn't. They've charged multiple people, and that is correct. There should be several people, I think, going to jail on this one. Someone planted a live round. Why would you ever need a live round for a movie or TV set ever? I don't think it was planted. I think it was just sloppy as heck. Now I'm going to stop here to just take a moment to really thank and dedicate this stream to the person who worked most tirelessly to help see Alec Baldwin charged. Because somebody out there spent a lot of time and a lot of effort. They really did their absolute best to help see Alec Baldwin go from the killing to a charge. And that person is Alec Baldwin. Because I think that without the help of Alec Baldwin, they wouldn't have been able to lay these charges. Alec Baldwin gave a number of interviews, and man, was he dumb. Man, was he dumb. Because I don't think, absent Alec Baldwin's, repeated interviews, I don't think that they could have gotten to laying charges here. So let's look at what they charged him with, because I think that is a useful thing to look at. If it will actually come up. There we go. All right. Involuntary manslaughter consists of manslaughter committed in the commission of an unlawful act, which I don't think they're alleging here, right? Not amounting to felony, or in the commission of a lawful act, which might produce death in an unlawful manner or without due caution and circumspection. So this is a negligence-related statute, right? This is negligence. And the what that means is that he doesn't have to intend anything. He just has to have not done things that he ought to have done. And I see, how was Baldwin dumb? And then the next person in chat answers the question. Baldwin ran his mouth and effed himself. So here's the thing. Baldwin, he is saying, I'm an actor. We're not required to know anything. But you're kind of required to know some things if you're going to handle a gun. That's just the legal standard, is you got to know some things. Now, I have spoken to lots of armorers on this. I called around. I talked to and you know what? Lots of armorers didn't want to come on streams because, be quoted, because armorers want to continue working in the profession. And if they are, if they're seen to be talking bad about Baldwin, then they may not, get work. So that is kind of a concern for a lot of these, a lot of armorers. But what they noted is that proper practice is that as a gun is being handed to the talent and to anybody who might actually be to have the gun pointed at them, what they should be doing, what the actor should be doing with the armor. So the armor should be showing them as they load the dummies and basically going, you agree this is a dummy? Great, it goes in. You agree this is a dummy? Great, this goes in. They should be showing them. And Baldwin talked about that. And Baldwin talked about knowing, the difference between, because Baldwin at times in his interviews was like, I'm just an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. I just rely on other people. And then at other times he's like, let me tell you all of my expertise. And the let me tell you all of my expertise is the dumbest thing he could possibly have been doing there, because now he's establishing that he should have known better. I mentioned that the armorer is kind of the person who is responsible for everything, right? The armorer's job is to make sure you don't get shot on set. I mean, providing the guns is secondary, but the key thing is making sure no one gets shot. She was kind of bad at her job, right? Gutierrez Reed. But ultimately, Baldwin takes the gun from somebody who is not the armorer. He takes the gun from the AD, and the AD says, hey, this is a cold gun. It's like, who the heck are you? Like, why? This is not the person who should be making that sign off, especially because he knows the armorer is not present. He also would have known that they were not doing like proper safety briefings and so forth, because they should have been getting like a daily safety briefing, and they weren't. And there's so much going on here where he ought to have known that things were sketchy as heck, and that he can't just trust this. He's claiming that he had no knowledge of any of this, and I can't say for certain, but I'm going to bet that we're going to get that we're going to hear some things about like, actually Baldwin did know about all of this. Actually, Baldwin did hear all of this. And I see AD was the safety officer. Sure. He still isn't the guy who should be doing, firearms. I have had people at the range try to hand me guns, and they say it's unloaded. And the first thing I do is I check the gun, because you don't just take a gun and assume it's unloaded. And I've done this with people who have way more firearm experience than me. The guy who wins the 3-gun competition hands me a gun, and I check it's unloaded. Ian McCullum hands me a gun and I check it's unloaded. And I'm just going to say this has happened. Like, literally, Ian McCullum, gun Jesus, handed me a gun because he's brought a firearm to, one of the 3-gun matches or one of the 2-gun matches I was at. And he's letting people see this neat gun that he's got. And he's just handed it through every other person. And the first thing I do is I check that it's unloaded. Because even though this is the guy literally called Gun Jesus online, you check that. And, typically, like if I'm handing something off to somebody, like if I was going, again, this is airsoft for the YouTube censors. But, if I was handing this to a friend, the first thing I'd be doing is I'd be going, let's hold it open. You can see, look inside, verify it's empty, Now you take it. And I see Dusty is asking, have I ever checked and it was actually loaded? Yes. I have had people try to hand me a gun, people who ought to have known better, that was actually loaded. Yeah. So you check. You check. It's ridiculous. So you always want, this is the practice. I had people send me pictures. I had Armor send me pictures on the conditions that I can't use the pictures for these videos, which is frustrating as heck because I would love to show you the pictures. But I've seen multiple actors in pictures with the armorers because the armorers are getting pictures with the actors showing them at work of them showing the talent and like some big names showing the talent that they are, that the gun is safe. Baldwin should have been at that a long time ago. And I see we're getting somebody in the chat's getting to where I was going. If I watched the Jensen Ackles interview, is there anything noteworthy from it? You bet there is, because Jensen Ackles isn't a dirtbag. Jensen Ackles is, was sitting there going, hey, hey, this is a situation where you actually need to, you have to actually check. And I think it was his kid that a gun was pointed at on this set. So, yeah. I read that the actor can't check the gun themselves, but can have the armorer check the gun in front of them. That is exactly correct. That is the protocol. The actor doesn't touch the gun until it's been shown, but the armorer should show them that it's, safe. The armorer should show them. Jensen Ackles, actually cares about gun safety. Baldwin, in his interview, is just like, somebody else's problem. Well, you can somebody else's problem somebody to death when you're dealing with guns, and I don't have any patience for that. Jensen was amazing. Do you think he'll testify? I don't know. I don't know that his evidence would be super useful. I don't know that they would call him as an expert, but yeah. Are we making our own actors in Canada do a gun handling course? They don't have to do a gun handling course. They do, however, have to go through, some training with the armor, and the armor is there supervising. Often, if you were to, often you'll have a scene and there's like, guys holding a gun. And if you were to just like zoom out a little bit, you'd see the armorer standing right behind him, just out of frame, so that the armorer is in a position to go like, no. And I've talked to armorers who have said, like, quite literally, that they have done things like gone up and stepped in and taken a gun away from an actor midway through a shot and been like, yep, you don't. I talked to an armorer who noted that he had essentially done some character editing because he told the production, like, hey, this particular actor, I'm not putting a gun in their hand because I will not. So that particular actor got redone so that they were no longer equipped with a gun in the scene. They were now equipped with a knife or something similar. So, yeah, Baldwin ignored everyone quitting over safety issues. He was producer. We saw photos with you of the sloppy set. Yeah, the storage was just an absolute nightmare. It is ridiculous on that. I see. Wasn't Hannah kicked out of the tent due to COVID protocols? I don't think that's accurate. What I've heard is that they basically just had her on multiple jobs and she was expected to be doing a whole bunch of different things. So, yeah. Hey, Uncivil. Welcome. Good to have you in the chat here. So, she should have been stepping up, but Baldwin himself has responsibility if he's going to be taking a hold of a firearm. And this is actually a firearm. He says it's a prop gun. Prop just means thing on a movie set. Like, this thing could be a prop on a movie set. It is an actual leather pouch, but it could be a prop on a movie set. Doesn't mean it's a fake necessarily. You could have a knife that's a prop on a movie set that's an actual sharp knife. You can have firearms on a movie set that are actual sharp firearm or actual sort of live firearm. So, yeah. Cat W, I would love to hear what they have to say. So, yeah. Melissa Ermintrout saying, I think we can 100% agree checking the gun is a smart thing to do and not doing it is stupid and dangerous, but I'm not sure doing it is a legal responsibility, especially in this situation. The good news is that are you doing something that is stupid and dangerous is kind of not a bad way to paraphrase criminal negligence, which is the standard here. So if he is criminally negligent, being, stupid and dangerous, yeah. And just to be people have said, hey, listen, this will mean that, we can't have actors handling guns. And the thing is that it takes minimal training to figure out what you're doing with all of this. And if an actor is unwilling to go through, the minimal training for this, then I'm okay with them not handling guns on a movie set. Like, maybe you don't get to be the assassin who goes after John Wick. Maybe you have to be the guy who's sitting in the background reading a newspaper, or the lead in a rom-com, or literally anything else. Literally anything else. So, how much retainer would you have asked to represent Baldwin? I would probably have been asking him for more money every time he talked. Why do they need to handle actual guns? Because airsoft guns look dumb if you know what you're looking for. And I'm just going to point out, again, airsoft gun, but if this is pointed at the screen, I will spot this in a hot second and go, what the heck is wrong with this? Because this does not look like the front of a gun. I will spot it when they have the, sort of moment of holding this up to the side and it says Tokyo Maori on the side. You've seen the moment in what is it, Snatch, where the guy says, and that's why your gun says replica on the side, and my gun says 50 BMG, or my gun says, yeah. It's a thing, right? And it does affect verisimilitude. Actors trying to pretend to do pretend recoil also often look dumb. There's a lot of moments where you just spot it, and yeah. And New Mexico statute declares ordinary negligence when involuntary manslaughter involves a deadly weapon. Yeah. So, yeah, that's why my gun says Desert Eagle on the side and yours says replica. That is a critical moment in the movie. So, Yeah, there's a lot of movies that do that by accident, where there's a close up. There's actually more and more now, and this is a side rant. There's more and more now video games where this happens. So what you'll see is people are getting me on the. It's been a while that I don't have the quote. You'll see this in video games now, where the video game people use a 3D scanner to create a model of an actual of a firearm, but they'll do this with an airsoft gun. So what you'll see now is you'll see like an MP5 in a video game that is clearly an airsoft gun, and that's always disappointing. Um, so yeah, there's reasons for it. There's certain kinds of scenes, especially where you need the lighting from the blanks, that you just cannot do without a real gun. The other thing is that there have been tons and tons of movies filmed with real guns. Almost every movie you see online or you see out there with firearms in it has real guns in it. But they don't have problems because they have real armorers who aren't like 20 minutes in at the job, and where there's not like complaints about like, hey, is our armorer drinking on the job again? So yeah, see, this is not a problem that needs fixing in the industry. I agree. This single production was the problem, and the first movie-related firearm death in decades. And that's the thing, is that there's a lot of people who are, basically, there's a lot of other armorers who are losing their business over this, because people are saying, we need to go to CG, which looks terrible usually, or we need to go to airsoft, which also looks terrible usually. And really the proper thing is we need charges to reinforce that there are safety standards and that this is important. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. This notion that Baldwin, because he's an actor, gets to just completely hand off responsibility is, to me, anathema. It means he's got responsibility, and while he should be checking, while the armor has a lot of responsibility, he's also got some responsibility not to be an idiot. If this trial isn't televised, I'm going to be pissed. Yes, I want to see this trial so bad. This is one that when it's scheduled, I will try to book to be there. KVB Studios was going to get back into it until Baldwin shot Helena. Screw Baldwin and Gutierrez Reed and Halls and PDQ, Seth Kenny and Sarah Propsmaster. Incompetent effers. You bet. I can't agree more with all of that. There were so many moments of incompetence there. And yeah. I see as part of acutely portraying a person who works with guns, wouldn't you want to be checking the gun yourself? Because people who do that are constantly checking the gun. Yep. The problem isn't that films can't be shot safely with real guns. It's that the safety protocols that already exist weren't followed. Yes. This was basically they basically were sitting there going, how many times and how much can we F around before we find out? And well, they found out. Because they were doing a lot of effing around. There was so much effing around on this particular movie set. It was ridiculous and a half. So, yeah, it's so frustrating. Amra, thank you for the membership here. The armor on Public Enemy said that if Depp and co-stars checked every Derringer, the movie wouldn't have been made. It would have taken forever. I know it's different from this case. It really doesn't take long to check. Just doesn't. So, yep. Blanks can be as dangerous as live rounds. In the 80s, actor John Eric Hexum was on a series called Cover Up. He was playing with a gun on set and decided to play Russian roulette. There was a blank in the chamber, and he ended up killing himself. Yep, as I recall, he was doing that with a semi-auto, too, which was not exactly the way to go. But, yep, blanks can absolutely still kill. Nancy P., thank you very much. Ernest Williams, my brother, disabled retired Army and gun expert, handed me a gun after clearing the chamber with a clip in. I checked the chamber, and yes, now there's a bullet. Always, always, always check. Yep. Gun people will not take it as an insult if you check a gun that they hand you. They like, seriously, I will take, if I'm at the range and I check and make sure that it's empty and hand it over to you, I am expecting you to check again, because like that is how things are done. Take the second. If you have minimal minimal expertise, it doesn't take much. Might actually be true if every single person on set checked every single firearm, a film would not get made. I mean, a check has to happen, so it can happen in front of the actor and the person it's going to get pointed at, because that's another person who's got a right to see this checked, right? So I see. Would really enjoy you and EDB having a conversation about this. Your opinions respectfully differ. I would love to have a conversation. So, what are the odds of at least one of the prior armorers who's worked with Baldwin gets called to the stand? I don't know. That's a prosecution strategy aspect, and that could really go either way. So, yeah. L. Fliggins, thank you very much for the membership. Same with Cat W. All right. Now, there are some further, things here. People are asking, what do I think his odds of conviction are? And I'm going to say somewhere around 40%. And quite, you might be saying 40%. That's not great. You're right. I mean, the thing is that this is going to go in front of a jury, and the jury may well accept his argument of, listen, yeah, this is, this is not his job. They may very well say that. I don't agree with that. I don't think a lot of gun people agree with that. But yeah. And the NYPD has dozens of negligent discharges every year from racking the slide, watching the round eject from the chamber, then dropping the loaded magazine and pulling the trigger. Yeah, this is a really common kind of error. And I will tell you that so the police station, or the remand center, has a thing there for, it's a little sort of tube, like a reinforced metal tube, that an officer puts his gun in and unloads into, with the tube, so that at that point the if they screw up, that it doesn't fire into the air. It fires into this thing that's designed to capture it. It's got dents in it from people making the mistake. And the mistake that's being described here, you'll see that this thing that I'm sort of using as a demo has no magazine. But what happens in that case, what he's describing is, you rack the slide, a cartridge gets ejected, you close it, that's now fed in a new cartridge. And then if you drop the loaded magazine, there is still one in the chamber at that point. At that point, if you pull the trigger, it goes boom, and somebody could potentially be injured. So, yeah, this is the kind of thing that you are taught about. And yeah, gun person, I'm going to get mad and take it back if you don't check. Yep, absolutely. I will get upset if, I will tell people, hey, check this. So 40%, I mean, that's not fantastic, but it's still a reasonable prospect of conviction. I would proceed with these charges. And I will say, if this was in Canada, I think the charges get a lot better. I think he'd be a lot more likely to be convicted in Canada, because in Canada, there is actual, the case law basically says, no matter what, it doesn't matter if you've got an armor, it doesn't matter if whatever else, you have an obligation that cannot be waived on this. There's a really good question here. Will he plead out? I'd bet, I'm not actually a betting man. I don't bet things, but it's just, I don't think he'll plead this out. And the reason why is because if he pleads this out and gets convicted, I don't think he acts again. And that's going to be a major thing. I also think he is an egotistical, arrogant boob. And I think he's going to say, we are going to fight this to the mat because I need everyone to know that I am innocent. I am, I am the best person ever. So Alec Baldwin, I cannot see pleading this out. And I also think that he is going to be the prosecution's best friend if he gets up on the stand, because Baldwin is not going to do a great job at winning over a jury. Baldwin's statements thus far about how he's the real victim, and isn't it really sad that he, Alec Baldwin, has been facing all of this scrutiny for having shot and killed a woman because he just couldn't be arsed to check. Like, that's not gonna be great. The other thing that's going on here is that I've got some. It'll be interesting to watch. I gotta say, I'm really looking forward to this trial. He has given so many interviews, and some of those interviews are really going to be harmful for him. Because when he gets up and says, it is the saddest thing ever that, I am super sad, I'm super heartbroken. It's like, okay, roll tape and we'll see, we'll see this moment where you're talking about how unfair it is that you're getting criticism. Yeah. It's frustrating as heck. I see Emma Black saying, please live stream this with EDB if it streams live. That would be great. I would love to do that. The other thing here is that I would, this is one I might think about going down there for. This is one I might think about going down there for. The other thing I will say is that Alec Baldwin is insane if he proceeds with the filming of Rust at this point. What I would be doing is saying, because of the charges here, and, I will say, because it's, we disagree. This is what I'd be saying if I was Baldwin's lawyer. I'd be saying, we disagree with his, with him having been charged. We are confident he will be cleared. But because of the charges, he is choosing to step away from filming of Rust. And that, that is a decision that we are making because of this. So I think that would be, yeah. Question: will Alec Baldwin be held on bond after being charged? I think he's going to get on some sort of bond. How can they continue filming with him on bond? Therefore, no contact with other witnesses. He's going to get released. I don't think they're going to hold him here. But it depends on what conditions they impose. Because if they do impose a condition that bars him from having any contact with a bunch of these other people, then that might be difficult. The other thing that is a really common restriction on somebody who's facing a charge involving guns on your release might be you're not allowed to handle guns. Well, that's going to be fun. I see. I'm shocked that they're going ahead on filming. It's not freaking Ben-Hur. The thing is that they're going ahead on filming because at this point, Baldwin wants to save his career. And now they've made it into a big thing. I will also say that cynically, somebody in that room probably said, and will probably deny vehemently if you were to question them on it, but somebody in that room discussing whether they were going to proceed with this or not almost certainly said, well, now that everyone's heard about the the Rust movie, everyone knows the name of Rust. Now it's going to make a whole buttload of money. Now you have to do it. I think that somebody there is probably saying this is going to be a big boon for this film that was going to be a little tiny, tiny production, and now it's going to be a big deal. So we pretty much have to go ahead. We've turned this from, sort of indie film that no one was really hearing about, with one big name on it, sort of semi-big name on it. I think Alec Baldwin was already kind of past his prime name, years, but into something that everyone knows about. I think that is ridiculous. And I will tell you, I am not going to go watch that movie. I will not. I may see it, but I'm going to make sure that I see it in a situation where I know that they are not getting any money for it. So I might go see it like on an airplane or something like that. So somebody's saying, against all advice, Runkle continues to sit wrong. I missed the chat and the scroll, but Runkle has a bad back. Runkle cannot sit in one thing for a long time. So, yeah. Rust might have a completion guarantee where if they cancel production, they have to pay back financing parties. Usually there'd be a clause that allows them to back out on that if there's something something unusual that's happened. And I feel like this is a situation where that is something unusual that has happened. So, yeah. So another thing I'll address, I've seen people mentioning it in the chat. Baldwin says he didn't have his finger on the trigger. No, he did have his finger on the trigger. That is very clear, and I will say that I did some testing with this. Again, the same make and model of firearm. I couldn't get it to fire in any way without having my finger on the trigger, but it's real easy if you are sloppy. Here's what I'm certain happened. I'm certain he was doing fanning. So what fanning is you sort of draw back the hammer and it fires. And the thing is that the way fanning works, fanning doesn't happen unless your finger is on the trigger. And yeah, there's video of him with his finger on the trigger before he shot, like moments before. It doesn't take a whole lot of pressure once you've pulled the hammer back to get it to fire. It is just a little bit more, than resting your finger on it. Just a touch more. So if you are the sort of person who is against guns and who makes a point of refusing to learn, you probably haven't developed the good habits. You will see me when I'm dealing with the airsoft gun. I do this. And the reason why I do this is because I have a habit of doing this. I do this with drills. I do this with all sorts of things, right? And the reason why is because you get into the habit that you don't ever do this. It's this. This is what you do when you're just about to fire. This is what you do when you're dealing with it, elsewhere. The FBI tested that gun to failure, and testing to failure means they tested it repeatedly to the point where it broke. And they were trying to get it to fire without the trigger being pulled. They could not. The gun was tested to failure without firing, without that. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't think that argument holds any water whatsoever. Now, Baldwin has, through his lawyer, put out a statement that, he says that this is a terrible miscarriage of justice and that the actor would be exonerated. And so we'll see. I mean, he may well be exonerated. He may well be cleared. But I don't think it's a terrible miscarriage of justice for him to be charged in this circumstance. I think that it's proper. The prosecutor has said, on my watch, no one is above the law and everyone deserves justice. That's great. That's a proper thing there. Now we're going to get a judge who's going to determine if there's probable cause. I want to see sort of what goes on there, because there is a possibility that the judge will go through it and decide the same thing that some of the people on Twitter are saying, that it was the armorer's fault and he shouldn't face charges. That is still possible. That is still possible. Mike Jones, going to be getting to that. We haven't gotten to that yet. Gutierrez Reed said she didn't commit involuntary manslaughter and called the shooting a tragic accident. Yeah, it's a tragic accident that was made possible by your incredible negligence. So, there's so much indication of negligence on that one that, I just... So, I also want to talk a little bit about this Screen Actors Guild, because the Screen Actors Guild is, has put out a statement. And so I'll see if I can pull that up here. All right. Now it's super small. Let's see if we can unsuper small it, folks, because it's not super useful if I'm like, hey, here's a statement that you guys can't read. All right. Now hopefully this is legible on your guys' screen. SAG-AFTRA released the following statement on today's news regarding charges in the Rust tragedy. The death of Elena Hutchins is a tragedy, and all the more so because of its preventable nature. It is not a failure of duty or a criminal act on the part of any performer. Keep in mind, the Screen Actors Guild represents the screen actors, and so they have a profound reason to suggest that actors will never face any liability. This is kind of like reading the statement from the police union after a police shooting. The prosecutor's contention that an actor has a duty to ensure the functional and mechanical operation of a firearm on a production set is wrong and uninformed. We're not talking about the functional and mechanical operation of the firearm. We are actually talking about them just doing the things that the protocol requires them to do. An actor's job is not to be a firearms or weapons expert. Nobody's asking them to be an expert. We're asking them to have minimal competence, right? Minimal competence which is what we expect for anybody who's dealing with anything super dangerous, right? This is like saying, hey, listen, the actor was told to drive the car, and the actor doesn't know how to drive a car, so it's just fine. How were we supposed to know that they would run over that child? Well, I'm sorry. There are certain things that if you want to do that are very dangerous, you should have minimal amounts of training. Firearms are provided for their use under the guidance of multiple expert professionals directly responsible for the safe and accurate operation of that firearm. And that professional was not present during the critical time. So that is one of those places where you're like, maybe I should stop what I'm doing because, there is, where is the armor? I'm waiting for the armorer to get here. In addition, the employer is always responsible for providing a safe work environment at all times, including hiring and supervising the work of professionals trained in weapons. Yeah, that sounds like a place where you might say, fault a producer. Chat, do you remember who the producers included? Yeah. Carrying on here. The industry standards for safety with firearms and use of blank ammunition are clearly laid out in Safety Bulletin 1, provided by the Joint Industry-Wide Labor Management Safety Commission. The guidelines require an experienced, qualified armorer to be put in charge of all handling, use, and safekeeping of firearms on set. These duties include inspecting the firearm and barrel before and after every firing sequence and checking all firearms before each use. Baldwin would have known this, and Baldwin would have seen that the armorer was not on set. Baldwin would have seen that the firearm was not inspected and, the barrel inspected by the armorer before and after every firing sequence, and would have seen that the armorer didn't check the firearm before each use. So, they're actually setting out that, their theory of Baldwin's defense here is actually a theory of how you get to conviction. This is the prosecution's case for conviction. So, Screen Actors Guild, you ain't doing him any favors here. I might actually bring up this statement if I was the prosecution, because, yeah, that's not great. The guidelines do not make it the performer's responsibility to check any firearm, but you always have a responsibility before you take a firearm. Performers train to perform, and they are not required or expected to be experts on guns or experienced in their use. If you are not sufficiently experienced to handle a firearm safely, do not handle a firearm on set. The same way you wouldn't drive a car if you don't have a driver's license. The same way you wouldn't swim if you don't know how to swim, right? This is insane. This is nuts. The industry assigns that responsibility to qualified professionals who oversee their use and handling in every aspect. Anyone issued a firearm on set must be given training and guidance in its safe handling and use. Did that happen? But all activity with firearms on a set must be under the careful supervision and control of the professional armorer and the employer. That sounds again like liability here. He handled a firearm without being under the careful supervision and control of the professional armorer. They're setting out his liability. Screen Actors Guild, you suck at this. You suck at this so bad. Why are you trying to tell us how guilty Baldwin is? So, yeah. Okay, maybe that's enough of that. There's other topics other than Baldwin. Do people have more Baldwin questions before we move on? Because I dislike Baldwin on this one, and yeah, I am frustrated. Anybody? We'll give it a few seconds here just because there's a delay there. As producer, he kicked the armor off the set. I don't know if he directly did that, but yeah, yeah. All right. I'm seeing people saying we can be done with Baldwin. Am I drunk enough? There is 1 ounce of alcohol in this. So, nope. We have some super chats to get to before we go any further here. If the gun person does not take it as an insult that you check the gun, get away from them. They're a danger. Or does take it as an insult that you check the gun, rather, get it away from them. Yeah. If I had a, if a friend of mine got upset that I checked the gun after he handed it to me, I would not go shooting with that person anymore. I love you, Runkle. Thank you very much. Secret Labs customer support. Against all advice, you continue to sit wrong. Yes. That's got to be my favorite parody account there. Continuing with filming and making Hutchins' husband a producer was part of the civil settlement, so that if they go ahead, they may be breaching that agreement, quite possibly. Somebody asking, am I doing Friday Night Frenzy? I should be on for a bit, but I can't say for certain. I will be on for, I should be on. I have to figure out my schedule because I owe Mrs. Runkle some time as well. Just got here. Did he talk about the RCMP canceling the gun grab rollout in PI? Not yet, but we will. Lynn, thank you very much for the $5 super sticker. Robin Silver, hi Ian, glad to catch your live stream. Submitted my Gundy votes for you for the week. You can actually vote for me every day, so that is something you can check there. You can check every day. Just adding that film dummy is also a term for Baldwin. Love it. All right. Let's talk about one I've been getting a whole lot of questions about. Impaired driver in Woodman Avenue explosion launches lawsuit against Budweiser Gardens drink provider. Lots of people have been going, what the heck? And so here's what happens. This woman goes to the bar and she drinks very, very heavily. She then gets into her car and drives, and she causes... No, wait, it doesn't want to... no, wait, will it let me play this? So she causes an explosion after hitting a gas line, which injures several people, 7 in fact, and damages a bunch of homes, results in an evacuation. Um, Basically, it's a major disaster. But now she is suing the people who served her the booze, and so lots of people have been like, "What the heck? Why? Where is the liability here?" And here's the thing: there is actually some liability that you can get from as a server of alcohol, and the where this can come up is if you overserve somebody, like if you serve them after you know that they're too drunk to continue being served. And they may also have a requirement to take steps to ensure that you won't drive, including, for instance, calling the cops on you. So I see people saying she's claiming that the bartender should have recognized how drunk she was. Yes, that is what she's claiming. And so the reason why she's claiming this is that she's going to face a responsibility for a whole lot of damage. Like, I think it's literally millions of dollars in damage that she is facing. Yeah, 4.97 million is the amount on this, and so she wants the the bar to have to pay for at least part of that. So that's the basis for this one. I don't know how she's going to do, but the thing is, lots of people have said that this is ridiculous. It may not be ridiculous. It may be that the bar actually had a requirement to throw her out of the bar and to call her a cab. That's a thing. So I see somebody's asking, what was her blood alcohol content? I don't know. But regardless, I mean, she was apparently substantially intoxicated. She drove at an excessive speed, heading the wrong way down a one-way street. So yeah, lots of issues there. So that's what this one is about. This is not new law. Like, this is not a new principle. This is something that bartenders have been told. And I see it is sometimes difficult on busy nights to see when someone is too drunk. Absolutely. And there's going to be arguments about this. But this is actually a lawsuit that is not entirely ridiculous, if that makes sense. So she may have to get sued on that. It's like, that may be a thing there. Shouldn't a gas line on a road be protected from damage by a vehicle? From what I understand, she struck the the gas meter where it comes into the house. And there's only so much you can do to protect that from a vehicle, right? A vehicle's a pretty big thing. So does anyone on LawTube know copyright law? Some, but your primary source for that would be Leonard French, who has a channel. So check that out. Yeah, a vehicle can strike with a huge amount of force. Yep, a vehicle can go right through your building. Yeah. Lawful Masses with Leonard French is the expert. That is the guy I ask my copyright questions. So check him out. All right. So that is one story people have been asking me about, and I just wanted to cover it briefly. I don't know enough about the sort of details at this stage, but that's one people have been asking me about. Another one that was mentioned here. So somebody wants me to cover the lawyer interviews in the Idaho case. I am going to look at that, but I haven't watched them right now. And I'm going to watch them, but I want to do a live react to them. And I'm trying to bring Andrea Burkhart on. I'm trying to work it out. We're going to see if it works out. She's already said, hey, we're going to try to make this happen. It's just a matter of scheduling. So we're both busy people. Is the bartender or the owner of the bar or the establishment responsible? both can be responsible. And this is kind of a fun question. Let's say an employee causes you problems. So let's say an employee, let's say, for example, a UPS driver runs over your kid as they're delivering packages, right? You can sue that UPS driver, but the UPS driver probably has no money. And so your UPS driver isn't the guy you want to go after. The guy you really want to go after is is actually UPS. And the reason why you want to go after UPS is because UPS has money, right? You always want to sue the person with money in these things. So you go after, lawyers say you go after the deep pockets. The UPS driver is probably getting paid a little bit over minimum wage. So, yeah. You really want to, but there is a principle that says essentially you can be responsible for the actions of your employees. So, yeah. Have I talked about the BMO shooting in Saanich, BC? I haven't yet. I haven't followed up on that one because it's been a crazy day. Patricia, thank you for the new membership. Another one that I was asked to talk about and is quite relevant here is that it has been so previously I did a video talking about how they were planning on rolling out the gun buyback in Prince Edward Island. And Prince Edward Island has now, lots of people in Prince Edward Island were upset by this, were unhappy about it. And so the government has now come out and said, whoa, we're not going to be doing that. We're going to back away from this. And instead we're going to actually just do this through everywhere when we roll it out. So I think that this is them changing their plans in response to public pressure. We need to find a game to play together. Is there a RimWorld multiplayer mod? There is. I've never tried it. We can commit war crimes together. I'll have to find that one and just to see what's going on, because that's an interesting one. We'll have to sort of see what's going on there. It would be fun to try. Another one people have been wanting to know about is this one. Alberta Premier's office contacted Crown prosecution about Coots cases. Sources. So Smith denies this, but we'll have to see. And I don't know, but if this is the case, if this happened, that it would be quite improper. This would be something that would be a majorly improper thing to do. So, we have some interesting things there. They would not provide a yes or no answer when asked about the emails. So that is interesting. They noted, they said they did not recall viewing the emails, but it is difficult to say with 100% confidence that neither Kim Goddard nor Steve Johnson have seen the emails you have described, but not provided. I think that's actually kind of fair. I've got a lot of people saying, how would they not know? And the thing is that they don't. I don't feel like the news recognizes how many emails a Crown prosecutor gets in the average day, because, I can see that they wouldn't know that one. So that's an interesting one. Let's talk a little bit about bail. Lots of people talking about bail. And so what happened recently in Canada is that a police officer was killed by somebody who was out on bail. And this guy was out on bail for a number of charges, including some moderately serious ones. And there's a big call to reform bail. And I'm going to shock everyone, by saying that as a defense lawyer, I'm not super happy about the idea of eliminating bail. And I will tell you a story with sort of the serial numbers filed off a little bit. People are saying, how can you people get bail on gun charges? Well, not too long ago, I dealt with a guy who had gun owner with a license, misread the storage, transport, handling, display, etc. That was just something, just a guy who didn't understand the law. Well, when you don't understand the law, and I've been on Canadian content for about half an hour now, but when you don't understand the law, that is not a defense, because and there's some decent public policy reasons for that. The reason for public policy is you don't want to incentivize being the dumbest criminal in town. And you don't want to create a situation where, a criminal can say, like, listen, I am the dumbest human being on the planet, and therefore I am immune to prosecution on all charges. I am too dumb to know that it's not okay to murder people. Therefore, I get to murder people whenever I feel like it. This is not something you really want to see happen. So, I don't like that. This guy who had no record, firearms owner, when he was caught, basically said, hey, yeah, here's my gun storage. And they said, that's not okay. And he's like, oh, crap. The prosecution opposed his bail. This was a contested bail hearing. I had to fight for bail for this guy. And, no details here as to, anything else like that. But no bail was the Crown's position was this guy needs to be held in custody. And that to me is ridiculous. This guy should obviously have been given bail, right? And the number of cases I see where people are facing charges, including incredibly serious charges, where the prosecution's case is weak, is lots of cases. I will give you another example. Let's say you walk out of the bar and, you have been there with some of your friends, but also some of your friends' friends, right? People who you're just meeting at the bar, acquaintances, people you kind of barely know, right? And you're there and, you're not like halfway through an ounce of alcohol. You are all the way through like 9 or 10 ounces. You're doing pretty good. You're going, I'm not driving. I'll call a cab. And one of those guys says, you know what? Don't call a cab. That's going to cost you $30. I haven't been drinking. I'll drive us all. And you see the guy, he's cold sober. He's been, he hasn't been drinking. So you're like, sure, I'll save $30. I'll ride with this guy. I've never met the guy before, but sure. You get into his car. And as you're driving along, you get pulled over by the police. Officially, you're getting pulled over by the police because he's got like a burnt out taillight, or he didn't signal, or he was going 2 kilometers over the limit, or whatever else. Unofficially, he's being pulled over by the cops because the cops know this guy and they want to pull him over every chance they get because they know him to be a bad person. And you didn't know that. You just met this guy at the bar. Now the cops go and they find something, something in the car that lets them get to where they really want to be, which is searching the trunk. And they search the trunk, and in the trunk there are 12 kilograms of heroin and, another 8 kilograms of cocaine and 6 full auto rifles. This is a bad scene, right? But you can quite convincingly say, like, listen, the only reason I was in that car is because this guy was offering to give me a ride home from the bar where I was smashed, and I didn't know about any of that crap in the trunk. I can tell you, you are 100% getting charged. 100%. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that if they don't charge you, I see Wouldn't there be fentanyl there too? There'd probably be fentanyl instead of the heroin these days. Fentanyl has largely pushed heroin off the market. It's very difficult to get actual heroin now. But you are 100% getting charged. And the reason why is because they don't want where they have a trial of the driver and you show up and you say, that's actually my drugs and my guns. And the driver didn't know anything about it. And the problem is that if you're not charged, then when you actually admit to owning that stuff, you can't be convicted in that trial. And the further thing is because of the way Canadian laws work in terms of we don't have like pleading the fifth. What we have is that you have a right not to testify at your own trial. And you also have a right not to have your testimony at one trial used against you in your own trial. So even if you go in at Bob's trial and you say that was my drugs and my guns, when they charge you, they can't just use that statement against you. They have to actually have evidence. And so they can create this circumstance if they don't charge you where everybody walks. So you end up facing these very serious charges. Should you get bail if the Crown's theory of the case is basically that you are in the car and we are charging you for strategic purposes because we don't want this other guy to, get, this other guy to get away with it? 100% you should get bail in that. I see, what idiot gets rides home with random strangers from bars? That's as dumb as not checking a gun. I mean, the idiot who's already like 10 drinks in and, has been hanging out with this guy all night. This guy seems pretty cool. He's a friend of your friends. You don't know anything about, him having a record. He doesn't seem like he's going to have a record. Maybe he's even a guy that you've been working with, like a coworker that you've been working with for, 5 years. Uncivil says, why am I testifying it is my drugs when it is not, though? Probably because the driver whose drugs they are has either threatened that he's going to kill you if you don't, or has offered you a substantial payout. Those things happen. So they just want to make sure that that's not a circumstance that happened. So, yeah. I see. What idiot carries a gun when he knows he'll be drinking? Lots of criminals are stupid. You have no idea how stupid they are. Will they drop the charges after they convict the driver? Yes. A lot of those trials, I have run those trials, and they will do things like Crown is only seeking a conviction on Bob, invites dismissal on Frank and Susie and, Sarah. So, yeah. Here's the other thing. All you need to lay charges is for the Crown to swear in information saying they think you did some things. And they can do that based on very little. I have seen people charged on the basis that a break and enter happened in a place, somebody witnessed it and described an Indigenous male as committing the break and enter. We found this guy a block away who is an Indigenous male. We found no property on him. We found no break-in tools on him. We found nothing like that, but he's an Indigenous male who was in the neighborhood. So he's our guy, and they can lay charges on that basis. And so should that guy get bail? You bet they should. Absolutely they should get bail. In Canada, it's actually a constitutionally enshrined right that you have a right to reasonable bail unless, there is a good reason why you shouldn't have bail. So I am not a big fan of the notion that we should, that we should restrict bail further than it has been. Because I'll tell you, we detain a lot of people, and I don't necessarily trust the cops. The other thing that we should talk about, when the police say that this guy was out on bail, the guy who shot the police officer, he was out on bail, but he had a warrant for his arrest. Warrant for his arrest had been issued. Why? Because he missed court, right? He missed court, and, that's it. So the police could have arrested this guy at any time. All they have to do is just go, let's go find this guy and arrest him. They didn't do that. And the reason why they don't do that is because in most cases, the police don't work too hard on getting people who breach bail. If they find you breaching, they'll arrest you right then. But a lot of the time, they just kind of arrest people when they come across them. And the reason why is because criminals tend to continue to criminal. They don't just like, most people aren't like a one-off. Like most people in the criminal justice system aren't like, hey, I'm just going to one-off things. So they'll basically say, hey, we'll just wait for that and, and see. We'll just wait and, this guy will get picked up for something else. People get picked up because they just happen to, the cops run their plate and they say, hey, this car is registered to a guy who's got warrants. Let's pull him over and see if he's got warrants. I see. I don't think we have bail bondsmen here in Canada. We do not. They're actually illegal. So, yeah. It's, yeah. And you mean information wasn't relayed accurately and then conveyed a completely different meaning to potentially further their own motive? Shocking. Yeah, the police like to put out bad statements that are misleading, and they will do this all the time, and the media does not really report that. Somebody is asking an interesting question that I missed. They said basically, just trying to find it here. I hate how fast the chat scrolls sometimes. I should have put slow mode on, but oh well. So somebody had noted, like, why would you grant bail to somebody who's accused of like an SA if we have DNA evidence? Well, DNA evidence doesn't get you to a conviction because a lot of the times the argument on SA was there consent or not? The vast majority of SA trials are about not about did it happen, it's about was there consent or not? Was this a consensual transaction or was it a non-consensual transaction? That's sort of what that comes into. People are saying, what about braking instruments? Well, braking instruments is a really interesting example of a charge that can be really murky. Let's say you are walking home and you have a big black bag full of tools, and those tools include a hammer with a pry end. They include several screwdrivers. They include a crowbar, and the police are investigating a break and enter. Well, guess what? At that case, you are probably getting charged if the police find that. But lots of people have these kinds of tools. In Canada, it's illegal to possess instruments that could be used for breaking into any vault, vehicle, safe, etc., so long as they have been used or are intended for use in committing an offense. So it's not illegal to own a crowbar. It is illegal to own a crowbar that you just used to commit a break and enter. And it is also illegal to own a crowbar if your plan is to commit a break and enter with it. So, like, I have a crowbar that I've used for all sorts of things. And if I'm there, pulling nails on something in my garage, because I've screwed up a carpentry project, then that's not going to be possession of break-in instruments. If I'm wearing a ski mask and I'm in somebody's backyard, sort of prowling around, then I'm a lot more likely to get charged on that. What do you argue in a bail hearing? So there are 3 grounds that the court will consider to look at whether or not there was a break and enter. Little tired. There are 3 grounds to determine whether you should be denied bail. The first is your likelihood of attending court. Will you show up for court if you are released on your own? Because you're going to have court dates, right? So it's presumed that you're going to attend court, but there's all sorts of ways the Crown can show that there's a problem. The most common of those is you have a history of not showing up for court. So if you've got a record with 602 failures to appear, then the court is less likely to grant your bail because you don't show up. If you've been granted bail 6 times before and you have missed court each time, then the court is less likely to grant you bail because how do we know you're going to show up? That's sort of the first ground. The second ground is, are you going to be a danger to the public, or are you going to commit further offenses? Yeah, I'll just back up a little bit. Even if you don't have a record, there are circumstances like, let's say, if you remember what is it? The Chinese executive who was charged here a bit ago. I forget, Huawei. There was some primary ground concerns because it's like, if we let her out, is she just going to bail off to China? Bail. Is she just going to take off to China and then she'll never return? At that point, you're like, we don't know, right? How is that gonna happen? Let's say you are charged with like 6 murders. You might have a real good reason to flee the country, right? Let's say they think you're a foreign spy. You might have a real good reason to flee the country. All of these things might say this person is going to leave and never show up. Next thing is what we call the second ground, which is, are you going to commit further crimes or be a danger to the public? And there's really 2 ways you establish this. One is the same thing on the first one. Do you have a lengthy record? If you've got a lengthy record of committing crimes, especially a lengthy record of committing the same crime, like if you are, if you're accused of committing a burglary and you've got a record of committing 602 burglaries, then they might say, we think you're going to keep burglarizing things. Or it might be that the particular crime you have committed is so serious that we have a real serious concern as to whether or not you might do it again. So, for instance, let's say you're accused of being a serial killer. They might not want to release you because, if they say they think you've killed 6 people, they're worried you're going to commit another one. So, but even any homicide raises a big issue on this one because you got to think like it's a different criteria. If you've got somebody who, if you were to be like a liquor store thief, you're the kind of person who just grabs a bottle of booze at the liquor store and walks out of the liquor store. That's a different level of seriousness than if you commit murders, right? If you commit a second murder, that's a bigger deal to the public. So, how do you address these? Well, typically with strict conditions that will restrict what you can and can't do. And the third ground is kind of a catch-all ground. And this is that the public would be horrified if you were released. And I still sort of, it's kind of a vague category in that sense. But if you've got somebody who's accused of like a really serious SA, for instance, there might be no kind of conditions that would sort of solve that problem. This isn't the most common, but it comes up. And this one can actually cut both ways because sometimes the public might be horrified if you weren't released. Now, I see April saying, you look like you're in extreme pain from your back. You have no idea. I am hurting quite badly. Hamolka is an example of somebody who would have raised the third ground when, up for release. But the important thing to remember whenever somebody is up for bail is you are considered innocent at this point. You are presumed innocent. And so there should be a hurdle to detain you when you are presumed innocent of a crime, right? It should be that we should be reluctant. And I see Kurt Eaton saying, like horn honking. I actually think that a bunch of people were denied bail in that should have been granted bail. Bail is not for punishment. Like denying bail is not for punishment. Why? Because punishment comes later. Punishment comes later after you, if you actually are convicted of the crime. That's where punishment comes in. So, we can't deny people bail for punishment purposes because sometimes they're acquitted. As an example, and this is going to be a controversial example, Jian Ghomeshi. Jian Ghomeshi was accused of a whole bunch of really nasty offenses. And lots of people were very, very upset by him, by these charges. And he was ultimately acquitted. And I think he should have been acquitted because ultimately they acquitted him on the basis of, of deception there. No one knows who that is. Okay, there's lots of Americans here. So Jian Ghomeshi was a host on CBC. He did a radio show. And he was moderately popular. He was accused of SA and domestic violence by like a bunch of women, lots of women. And so they laid charges against him, and it completely annihilated his career. That was the end of him working as a radio host. And he, as is very common, made some very stupid statements. He put out a statement basically saying, yes, I am, I am into some kinky sexual things and, whatever else, which was a terrible statement. So he gets charged. At the trial, he's acquitted. And part of why he was acquitted was on the basis that it looked like a bunch of his accusers were being dishonest in court and had like worked together to work out what their testimony would be. So he was ultimately acquitted. How much jail time should he have done over charges that he was acquitted on? So yeah, see, and a member of the band Moxie Fruvis from An American Fan. Yep. So we had another case, and this is, we've had several cases of people who were really unpopular, but ultimately were acquitted. This is a thing. The other thing is that lots of people end up pleading guilty to charges that they are quite possibly innocent of, based on having been denied bail. And this is sort of, you remember my thing about like, hey, all we've got on this guy is that this guy was indigenous and in the neighborhood. So let's say we've got our liquor store, theft. Somebody walks into a liquor store, grabs a bottle of booze, and walks out. And so then they find an indigenous guy in the area and they charge him. And it turns out he's got a bottle of booze. It's not the same bottle of booze. It's a completely different brand. And the guy's got a receipt for it because he bought it at a different establishment entirely. But they charge him. And it turns out he's got a terrible record. So he gets denied bail. He's got an absolutely excellent, absolutely excellent defense to the charge. But he's probably still going to plead guilty because he will get a trial in 9 months. Right? And he's looking, if he pleads guilty, at maybe like 30 days in custody. So for just saying, you know what, I did it, I'm going to plead this out, he gets 30 days. If he fights it and wins, he gets 9 months. Do the math on that one, right? Not a lot of people are going to spend 9 months in jail just so that they can clear their name, especially when they've already got a record. If you get accused, detained, and acquitted, is there a sort of compensation of some sort? Not even a single dollar. Not even a single dollar. You get paid nothing. So, yep. Is there no contest in Canada? No. You plead guilty. So that's what it comes down to, is you got to plead guilty and you've got to acknowledge that you committed the offenses. So I saw this too often with kids placed in detention/custody while waiting on being able to have their case addressed. Yep. Can't understand how bail could be denied for petty theft unless there's a flight risk. because it might be your 60th charge of petty theft, right? And why is it your 60th charge? Well, it gets real easy to keep getting convictions on you if you're just going to plead guilty each time. So, practical question, is there jail capacity for it? No. If we were going to start jailing all the people who are currently facing charges who are on bail, you would have to like take Vancouver Island, clear it of all people, and use it as like a prison island. And you probably still wouldn't have enough space. Then notice that the idea that we can just start like, we're already towards capacity here in Alberta on how many people are detained. There just isn't that much space. And yeah. You have a better chance to get bail if you're wearing a white wig. I am not going to test that. So I see somebody saying, how is it just to not compensate somebody held in jail who is innocent or acquitted? Guess who decides whether or not compensation would be paid? Well, that's the government. Guess who would have to pay that compensation? Also the government. Guess who decides whether or not, so do you really think that the government is going to decide that they owe the money? No, they are not. And some people in the chat are saying, hey, does this mean Vancouver Island is big? Vancouver Island is pretty large. And Vancouver Island doesn't really make a great prison planet or prison island, because I might actually, if that was being used as a detention facility, I might be tempted to commit an offense just to go there. I really like Vancouver Island. Yeah, guess who's a dick? The government. Yes, absolutely. So this is really, tragic and the thing is there is always a quest for perfect safety. Perfect safety is an illusion. You will never get perfect safety because there's always going to be mistakes. And mistakes will happen in both directions. There will be people who are detained who shouldn't have been. There will be people who are released who were dangerous. The thing is that there is no guarantee that even somebody who's released on fairly minor charges could end up killing a police officer. It happens. People commit homicides. I see, come visit. We have oysters. I so want to. I haven't had like really ideal fresh oysters in a while there. So yeah. Parts of Vancouver Island are also a not impossible swim to another country, which would be a problem. Yeah, well, don't they also yeah, it's doable. There are people who've actually swum from Vancouver Island back to the mainland. I see. Do I know the story of Khalif Browder, who spent 3 years in Rikers Island because his family couldn't afford bail, accused of stealing a backpack? This sort of stuff happens. It's ridiculous. In Canada, it's a little less common because the rules for bail basically say that you shouldn't be denied bail simply because you can't pay bail, right? So let's say they say $5,000 cash, and you say, I don't have $5,000, because lots of people don't have $5,000 in cash on hand. They should lower your bail, which is why we see a lot of cash bails in Canada that are in amounts that the US thinks are stupid, because you get cash bails for like $100. I do tons of $100 cash bails because you can't put cash to a level that the person can't afford. So that's sort of a big deal there. And part of the reason for that disparity is that we don't have bail bondsmen, because the U.S. has bail bondsmen, and bail bondsmen will basically say, okay, so you've got a $100,000 bail. They'll take 10% of that, and they just keep that money. Like, that's just gone. and then they will come after you themselves if you don't make bail, because they don't want to lose the rest of that money. They don't want to get, on the hook. In Canada, nobody else can, you can't like run a business putting up bails for people. So instead, you have to put up your own bail. So that $100 might be like a homeless person's entire savings. It might be their entire money. Let's see, David Milgaard never has to pay taxes again and got a huge settlement for wrongful conviction. David Milgaard unfortunately passed away last year, I think it was. And Trials of the Century, I'm going to do one on David Milgaard. I'm actually thinking of waiting to do it towards May, because just for the anniversary of his passing. The U.S. is seeing more no cash bail laws. Yep, most bails in Canada are on what's called a promise to pay basis, which is what used to be called no cash. A promise to pay bail means that it'll have a dollar amount attached to it. So you might be on let's say you're on a $2,000 promise to pay bail. The way that works is that if you breach your conditions or if you miss court, the government can come after you to forfeit that bail. And forfeiting that bail turns it into you owe money. And now the government can come after you and can try to collect that money from you, which is basically like a civil judgment, right? Where they can say, hey, we want to take this money. And then they can come after and, seize your car. They can garnish your wages. They can all sorts of things. But yeah, that's sort of how that works. And it's a better system because most of the people who are in the bail system are poor, right? So bail shouldn't just be for the rich. But yeah, the other, sort of thing there is there is just recently a case that just happened out of Toronto. And that case, the judge threw the case out. It was gun charges. And they threw that case out because the police were taking forever to disclose information about the guns. And the reason why they were taking forever is because they just didn't feel like it. They had the information. They had it on hand. They just didn't do anything about it. So when the police are saying like, oh, why should people get bail? Well, should this guy get really held in custody for a lengthier period just because the police are dragging their feet on, on providing this information? And, it's also a question of like, should we really have a situation where, the police are going to blame everyone when there are some substantial issues on their end? Andrew Schoenfeld, this is a difficult question. I'm going to do a video on it. The short answer is I would not do it. The law is unclear here, and I would not do it. I am aware of the sort of publicly posted memo on that. I do not recommend following it. So that's the short answer. Lynn, thank you very much for the super chat here. Judge in Idaho case has issued a second gag order, a little more definitive as to who is not to speak. Might be a dig at the PA lawyer snuck in there. I did read the second gag order. I do think it is aimed at telling him, hey, you should seriously STFU. Like, it is Friday. Everyone knows what kind of Friday it is. Yeah, I haven't gone over his statements, and that'll be something for later, but I want to do that hopefully. And yeah, I went to law school with you. Now I make troll channels. I am super curious now as to what that's about. This is a really good question. Can you do a video on the problems of the police justice system on folks with physical disabilities and also the deaf community? I could have a rant on, you know what? I'm going to have a small rant. So the TTY machine was invented in the 60s. And you know how many police stations are equipped with one? Approximately almost none of them, notwithstanding the fact that for a long time, this was considered to be sort of basic stuff. So, yeah. I see. I remember when you worked at Commerce Place. That's all I can say. I am super curious. Super curious. So fair enough if you don't want to say, but super curious. So I see people are saying, what is a TTY machine? A TTY machine is basically a thing you can put like the phone receiver on, and it just gives you a little keyboard that you can type things out. It sends over the phone, and there's actually a free service for TTY Relay. So TTY Relay service is like literally here in my province. It is free where like the deaf person is using the TTY machine, and it goes to this relay operator, and the relay operator talks to me. So like an interpreter. These things cost like $100 to a few $100. They're pretty cheap overall. And they're not in these detachments. Why? Because I don't know. In the modern era, a lot of newer people, a lot of like deaf people in 2023 don't use TTYs. What they'll use is a cell phone because, as it turns out, texting is amazing. How many detachments are capable of passing a cell phone that is sort of cleared for use there to a deaf person? Very few. So what you end up with is deaf person in custody, and they want to talk to a lawyer, and there is no way to make that happen. And I've had police officers offer to do things like, hey, we will have you, we can have you relay a message to a police officer and he can write out his messages. And it's like, no, I'm not having a cop listening in on my conversations with the client. That is not how this is going to go. This is very basic, right? This is very elementary stuff, and we just don't do it. And it's absolutely maddening to me. If you come in and speak a different language, there are sort of services that will translate. If you have disabilities, certain disabilities can result in all sorts of difficulties. Yeah, I see. Also, no written record, please. This is why the cheap TTY machines are the best, because the cheap TTY machines are the ones that don't print out, and that's what you want. Had a situation where there's a guy with one arm, and the police couldn't figure out how to handcuff him because he was not wearing. Sometimes, if you have one arm, what they'll do is they'll handcuff you, and then they'll cuff it to your belt loop, so that then you have trouble getting out. Guy was not wearing pants with belt loops, so they had a real hard time figuring out how to handcuff this guy. And I was just like, and because they couldn't figure out how to handcuff the guy, they ended up using more force than they would have been needing to use in most circumstances. And I'm like, yep, this is kind of a thing, right? So we're not the best at dealing with disabilities, and there are some very basic elements of accommodation that aren't happening. So that is a rant. That, I promised a rant there. And you got a rant. Cherry C. Mills, thank you for the membership. Ann Liebman, why don't you try a standing desk? Hope you feel better. A standing desk wrecks my back and makes me unable to function in very short order. Yeah. Where do you keep your robe for court? Closet. It's like 5 feet away from me. I need to know more, Lol. What do Canadians use instead of bail bondsmen? Off to Google. The cops will pick you up for that. So that's what we use. I'm learning so much. You are terrific. Thank you very much. I just kind of love talking about the law. I could do this like all day, every day. Um, if you get accused, detained, and acquitted, is there some sort of compensation of some sort? No. They might apologize, maybe, and by might I mean like 1 time out of 10. So yeah, it's not super common. Have I tried more aggressive painkillers? I don't want to be on more aggressive painkillers. So yeah. Uncivil Law says, I love law more. That is quite possibly accurate, because Uncivil is the guy who goes through every single U.S. Supreme Court decision, and I don't have time for that. So, yep. Runkle of the Bailey, would love to see you join Rob and Scott for the Innocence Chronicles and look at Romeo Fillion as a Canadian case. He was my best friend's great uncle. I might look at that one as a trial of the century. I will try to have a look at that, because that seems like a possibility. Loves talking about the law. What about teaching law at a school of some sort? I have taught firearms and weapons law before. I would love to do so again. So can I do a video? We just talked about this. When I worked at Commerce Place, I am super curious. Runkle of the Bailey, thoughts on young thug doing a drug exchange in court while he's there for a RICO charge? This is beyond wild to me. I will tell you that doing crime is generally stupid. Most crime, when we say crime doesn't pay, most crime pays really poorly. And the reason why people get into crime is either because they have problems managing their emotions such that they are violent people, is one reason. Or they're addicted to drugs is another reason. Or they're just unable to work. And if you're somebody like who nobody wants to hire because you are massively unreliable, you can still crime to get income. There is you're never going to get fired for from copper theft. There is nobody who can fire you from stealing catalytic converters or robbing liquor stores. So, there just isn't that much money in it. Typically, like, most criminals walk in and the lifestyles they live, like, you've got drug dealers who are all like, yeah, man, and they'll flash all this cash on their like Facebook page or whatever, and none of that cash is theirs. All of that is going to somebody further up the chain. So they end up living in like these crappy little squalid apartments and, owing money and whatever else. So you see, no, he did a drug exchange while he was in court, while he was there for a hearing. He's a huge rapper. I mean, the courthouse is one of the dumbest places you can commit crime. Like, one of the dumbest places you can commit crime. Like, it's just nuts. What's this? Ever been to a floating pub? I have not, but that sounds cool. That sounds awesome. See, sir, unfortunately, crime does pay. It pays politicians, judges, lawyers like yourself. You're not wrong. I have had many files where I made more on the file than the accused did. Like, accused steals bottle of liquor, value $45. Lawyer, $2,000 retainer for a $7,500 trial. I will tell you, I do better on that than the guy who steals the booze. So, yep, it's a thing. The judge makes a fair bit of money being there for that trial day. So, yeah, I see fewer floating pubs in Canada in the winter. I think you would have a hard time floating anything right now. Where is your favorite place to visit on Vancouver Island? I used to go to Denman Island a lot. Denman Island was great. But the Denman Island is great. I like Victoria. I like lots of Vancouver Island. Honestly, my favorite places to visit are just like forests and beaches where no one is around. So, yeah, I see. Yeah, but barrier to entry to become lawyer or judge, very privileged statement to make. I mean, I'm just talking about the income, right? And I'm talking about, I think it's actually stupid how much money we spend on courts. And I will say this because I think that it is insane that over a $45 bottle of booze, like somebody is accused of stealing a bottle of booze, that we then spend thousands of dollars running this trial and thousands of dollars, incarcerating this person, perhaps. It's like, it's $45. It's like if somebody keyed my car and it cost me $300 to repaint it, but I could also spend an extra $10,000 to, get to kick that guy in the butt. I would not spend the 10 grand. I would just be like, okay, $300 to, to repay it. So, yeah. Somebody says, I hope you're an actual lawyer. I am. You can actually see me at the Supreme Court if you want. I posted the link on Twitter to the video. It's in one of my recent videos. So, yeah. $45 is crazy for a hobo to pay for booze. No wonder they steal it. I mean, if you're going to steal, you might as well steal the good stuff. Actually, vodka is real popular to steal because it's the easiest thing to drink if you are a straight alcoholic. Good friend is an attorney. He told me many defense attorneys require a $50K retainer. It really depends on what you're doing. If you're running a murder, then a $50K retainer seems pretty reasonable. If you are running if I'm running a theft of liquor bottle, or if I'm running a, like somebody's accused of having like slashed their ex's tires, then I'm not charging $50K total, let alone the retainer. So yeah. Katie's, I guess, became a YouTube member. I'm not sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. Runkle of the Bailey. Thomas Sowell did an essay arguing most criminals are rational. He is wrong. But because their options in life tend to be more limited, they view the risk-benefit differently than others. I will tell you, I've encountered some rational criminals, but not often. And I mean, what is here's the thing, is our system isn't even rational. So how do we expect criminals to be rational? If we're going to spend $10,000 to prosecute a guy for stealing an $8 sandwich, how can we expect the criminals to be rational about the money? Some of these things are rational in terms of like they have no other choice. So what do you expect? But a lot of stuff is, a lot of stuff is just straight up irrational. It's like, I'm sorry, a guy who's at a bar and, somebody comes up to him and says, hey man, I think that was my seat. And he just squares off and punches him in the face. That's not rational. That's a guy who just can't manage anger. And like, we have so many people who are in the criminal justice system because they are broken in various ways. The number of people who have like profound learning disabilities is huge, right? It's just this giant thing. So like, I know they're not rational because like, I ran a trial for a guy, and the Crown prosecutor, after he was convicted, I mean, the Crown had good evidence. It was kind of a faint hope trial. The Crown, was making the same kinds of rationality arguments. And I'm sitting there looking at this guy who has Velcro shoes. And the reason why he's got Velcro shoes is that he's gone his entire life and he's never been able to figure out how to tie a shoelace. And the guy's like, 30s, 40s, right? And I'm like, we're talking about this guy doing like these, calculations of rationality and likelihood of getting caught versus expected, thing. And he can't tie his freaking shoes, dudes. Like, all of this makes no sense. So, yeah. Kurt, I see the invitation for the trivia. We should do that at some point. I don't think it's going to happen, tonight, but yeah, we'll try to get that going here at some point. Because yeah, um, I think that's a sort of good thing to. It'd be good to do. I also don't know how my trivia would be because I suspect it's going to be all like U.S. cases. I actually think that there is a place for economic theories, and this is what we're talking about: is like if you punish people more, then the rationality thing will cause people to stop doing it. Uh, you're comparing rationality and logic to motor skills and coordination. I mean, the guy can't figure out the concept of tying shoes. Like, trust me, this guy was not somebody you're going to do rational calculation for. You could ask him to split a bill two ways, and you could wait all freaking week to have him try to do it. And it could be like $20. What is that divided by two people, right? So, yeah, there's plenty of people in the criminal justice system who are just completely unable to handle things. So, but we ourselves are irrational. There are plenty of places where it would be far cheaper to just provide people with stuff than it is to prosecute them for not having it. The example I'll give is I sort of describe this as the lens of drug prohibition. And what I mean by that is that if you go to a hospital and what the hospital is paying for a daily dose for an addict, if they were to provide it to an addict of whatever, of morphine, is like literally pennies. But the addict, because it's banned, doesn't pay pennies. He's paying for he's paying to make some drug baron somewhere super wealthy. So he's paying like $200 a day for his addiction. And, that's a lot more money than those pennies. We could provide him with the drugs for pennies, but instead we're charging him, he's going to pay $200. To get that $200, he has to steal goods that are worth $500 because he doesn't get full value about this, right? He doesn't get if he steals $200 worth of, car stereos or, cell phones or whatever else, he doesn't get $200. He's got to steal $500 worth of that. So that means the public is now out that $500. To get that $500 worth of stuff, he's got to cause probably $5,000 worth of damage. Because, to steal a cell phone that he gets $50 for, he's got to break your car window. This kind of stuff. He breaks into your house and whatever else. And sometimes, they might rob somebody with a knife. That person's got therapy. That person's got injuries. They've got all sorts of other stuff. And so we've managed to turn this 50 cent a day problem, if we were to just pay the guy, into a $5,000 a day problem. And then we'll turn around and we'll charge this guy, or we'll pay, me, put me out of work, please. I do criminal defense. Put me out of business. For God's sakes, put me out of business. They'll pay me a whole bunch of money to run his trial. They'll pay the judge a whole bunch of money to run his trial. They'll pay the crown prosecutor a bunch of money. Cops get a cut. Then he goes into jail. The jail is incredibly expensive. Like, all of this stuff costs money. And so we're saying, like, why doesn't the criminal make these rational decisions? Why don't we make the rational decision of, this guy's got an addiction, we'll pay 50 cents a day to keep him on this, to just solve that problem and save ourselves thousands and thousands of dollars, like piles of money. We spend piles of money on this stuff. It's literally just a cash fire. And so that's my kind of rant on the whole economic theories. Like, if we're going to have the economic theory, we got to start applying it to us first. And then we can start trying to apply it to the guy with FASD and, or a brain injury. Like, I mean, I've had so many clients who have literal brain injuries, and yeah, it's just maddening. So, yeah, that is kind of my rant on the economic theories there. Rob Price, thank you very much. I mean, fundamentally, we just don't want to, to do that. How many more morphine addicts would we have if we just gave it to them at 50 cents? The thing is this has been tested. This has been tested with projects. The UK did one. And what they found is we're going to have less morphine addicts. Because the other thing is, if you provide them the morphine, then you've got a consistent source for where the morphine, gets provided. And you can offer them things like, hey, here's treatment, right? Here's help to get back to work. That is actually we've actually found that it works better at getting people off drugs than sending them to prison does. The problem is that we have so many people who are committed to this. And I will tell you, I've talked to a lot of defense lawyers who have said things to me like, well, I don't like this plan because it would put me out of work. And I'm going, frick yes, put me out of work. You know what? I hate doing wills and estates or real estate transfers or whatever else. I will do that in a second if it means that we've got a better society and all of that. I'll dig ditches if that's what it comes down to. Like, let's just fix our society. The police get a tremendous amount of money for the war on drugs and have a tremendous incentive to keep that going. So why don't we, we could cut a tremendous amount of funding from policing. Because I will tell you, my local police force has multiple armored vehicles, aircraft. They've got all of this stuff, and like, we don't need it if we don't have the war on drugs. Like, we can get rid of all that. We can stop buying all this stuff. Wouldn't that be a much better situation? People ask me, like, how do we stop all this gun crime, like the gun violence on our streets? It's like, who's shooting each other on the Toronto streets? It's not like the guy who's going to the Target range on, every Friday. It's the guy who is involved in the war on drugs. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. But that's what it's about. So we have the potential to get to a better society, but we just won't do it. I will note as well that there is something, look it up on Wikipedia. It's called the Iron Law of Prohibition. And what it is that bans on drugs get you harder drugs. So what we used to have before opiates were banned was laudanum. And laudanum is a very low concentration of opiates mixed in with alcohol. And so that was a very common thing. You might drink that to get to sleep and so forth. It was ubiquitous. You also had people smoking raw opium. Like, you'd go to an opium den and you just smoke opium. The war on drugs got you from there to things like heroin. And heroin is much more potent. It also gets you from heroin to fentanyl and carfentanil, which are way more potent. And I will tell you, people on the streets prefer heroin to fentanyl. They just can't get it because the smugglers prefer fentanyl to heroin. It is maddening. When, I've got beer here. When Prohibition was in full effect, you couldn't get beer anymore. Because if you're a smuggler, you don't want to move beer. You want to move like really high concentration gin. Crack exists because we banned cocaine. All of this stuff, happened because we decided to set up the war on drugs. And if we got rid of the war on drugs, I can tell you that you'd be seeing a lot of people going back to laudanum. We could see laudanum again. And I will raise a glass if we have people getting off, fentanyl and onto laudanum. But yeah, I guess that's enough ranting here. I will just cover some super chats here, and then I'm gonna probably drop the chat, and I'm gonna send everybody over to Friday Night Frenzy because Rob's got a whole bunch to talk about, and I don't want to steal his thunder. So we'll sort of look at that. The introduction of methadone clinics in Australia was a subject of a lot of debate. Drug-related violent crime went down, but addiction has not. And if violent crime goes down, isn't that a win? Like, I think that's a win. Where can we find your Supreme Court video? I've linked it on Twitter. I will have to do so again. I'm not going to have time to go find it right now because I'm trying to wrap this up so I can send everyone over to Law and Lumber. Just for Friday Night Frenzy. I'll try to pop in as well. I'm not sure how long I can be, but yep. Amanda Lang, thank you very much for the super sticker. Ian Paler, for debate class, I prepared a persuasive argument for providing first offenders career training for this exact reason. They'll be out at some point. It's more about society than convict well-being. Absolutely. People are like, why are you being so nice to the convicts, giving them training? I'm like, because we don't want convicts. We want people to stop being criminals. Let's try to, avoid that. So, Friday Night Frenzy is law. It's law discussions over at Law and Lumber's channel. I see he is not live yet, but hopefully it'll probably send everybody over to the waiting room there. He should be live in a couple of minutes, although it is Rob. So I was going to say 2 minutes. It's Rob. Let's say 5 minutes. So yeah. Anyway, thank you, Jeremy Morton, for the super sticker. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope you found this to be interesting. Prison, the school for criminals, I can guarantee you, prisons are where people learn things. I would love to see people learn things in prison that are like how to get a job and not get into more trouble, because otherwise what they learn is things like how to hotwire a car. So pick what you want them learning, because they're going to learn something. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully see you on Friday Night Frenzy.